You're listening to the ambience of Singularity Computers. This is actually the sound that's going on in the background while I'm shooting this footage, and it's the sound of Spectres being created. We do most of our manufacturing and all of our assembly in-house, and certainly all of our design is done in-house by us. In this video, I'm going to cover the main features of Spectre 4. There will be a lot more to cover in upcoming videos and build logs, but in this video, I'm just focusing on the main things that customers are asking questions about. I have here both versions of Spectre 4, the standard version, and also over here, the high-end limited edition version, which we'll take a look at shortly. There are Spectre 4 add-ons, which we'll take a look at in separate videos, like the dual-lip side panel. Both of these cases are actually assembly prototypes, so you will see some imperfections because when we're doing assembly prototypes, we make no attempt to actually clean the cases or keep them free of scratches or anything like that, because these are purely for testing and they were for final prototyping. So starting with the main things that have changed on Spectre 4. Spectre 3 was actually an aging design. We first designed the metal in, I think it was 2019, and we had built up a very long list of things that we wanted to change and a lot of customer requests. On all of the versions of Spectre 3, we never actually changed the metal. We only made some small tweaks to improve the strength of the feet and the I/O. So yeah, really not much was changed on the Spectre 3 metal. We were mostly focusing on the distribution plate and the Powerboard with all of the different versions of Spectre 3. One of the main things we wanted to add was 420mm radiators. So Spectre 4 now fits 360 and 420 at the top and front, and you have 100mm of space for the radiators and fans at the top and the front. We've also greatly improved the strength of the metal all over. The legs are stronger, and most importantly the feet are stronger, because there was a problem on the early versions of Spectre 3 where, depending on the build, the weight of the build, the case could sag just a little bit, like a couple of millimeters, and we wanted to just completely, like we did solve this on Spectre 3 later versions with a stronger version of the feet, but we wanted to completely remove any potential risk of that ever happening again. And so we're using M6 instead of M4 bolts to attach the feet to the legs here. And we use stainless steel bolts, so they are extremely strong. The feet are just way thicker and stronger. But aside from all of that, even if they weren't, the case now can't sag because it's actually resting on the PSU shroud. So it doesn't matter how much weight you put on it, you really just can't get it to go anywhere because it's braced. The case is actually, the metal components are billet 6061 anodized aluminium. So it's complete overkill. It's very over-engineered. 6061 is what they use for higher end bicycle frames. And it's also CNC milled. So all of these parts are created from a solid block of material and then they're machined down. So it's a very accurate manufacturing process. And it is one of the big reasons for the cost of Spectre, because it's an expensive manufacturing process. It's something that's more used for things like aircraft. But yeah, it makes the case extremely strong, and for the amount of material that is there, it's also very light, but it is not a light case. The standard version of Spectre 4 is about 13-14 kilos, and the high-end version is almost 20 kilos, and that's empty. So we also lengthened the PSU shroud because customers would often request, a larger PSU shroud for big power supplies and for improving cable management. And we decided to put the D5 pump inside of the PSU shroud because customers would also often complain they didn't like the look of the cable coming out the back of the D5, facing towards, the really visible side of the build. So that is now hidden in there, and it just gives a lot more space in the power supply shroud. It also makes things cleaner because the radiator and fans, depending on your radiator thickness, will come right out to here. So it kind of removes dead space around, and creates this clean and balanced look around the outside of, the core of the build, where all of the really nice details are going to be happening. We also have dual layer top and front panels, which is something that's new, and there's quite a number of reasons for this. The main one is dust filters. So all fan locations are now dust filtered. It also was a bit of an aesthetic feature because we can now have these glowing sections, which you can see here. But it hides the radiator fasteners, which kind of look a bit ugly out in the front, so you now won't see those. And another interesting little addition is that it creates a bit of space between the radiators or the fans and the ventilated panel, which can reduce fan noise and improve airflow very slightly. You know, that's just a minor thing. For the distribution plate, we have also made a lot of changes. The overall dimensions are different. The only thing that remains the same is the general layout, and that is because the layout of the case has remained the same, which we think is important for the character of Spectre. Like, we'll do different layouts on other cases, but this is really the Spectre layout, which we think is a vital part of the character of the case, which should stay. And it's just a layout that works extremely well. The distribution plate layout has a lot of flexibility. It's something that we couldn't see any benefits from changing, no matter how long we have, you know, looked at this and tried to do something different. There is no benefits that come out of it, only negatives. So it's just something that we have not done. But the reservoir volume is different. The reservoir design is a little bit different. We're using a thicker front layer now. We used to use 6 millimeters. We're now using 10 millimeters. And this is because we're using countersunk fasteners. So now everything is lined up flush, but countersunk fasteners do require, well, you should use thicker material with it, because otherwise they will create a weakness because they're actually machined to depth. And this was an aesthetic, you know, we did it for aesthetic reasons, but it also helps with assembly. Like, it makes assembly quicker because the fasteners center everything nicely. And using this thicker material means that it is stronger. And the reason that we wanted to make it stronger is because sometimes customers think the fasteners might need to be checked on the distribution plate just in case of leaks, even though we do all of this here. When we do assembly, we pressure test everything and check it for leaks. But then sometimes customers would over tighten the fasteners, and this can cause damage to the acrylic. So we wanted to create a bit more safety and tolerance there. So that is the main reason we're using some thicker materials, but also, you know, at the same time, improving the aesthetics, making the assembly easier, which is also good if the customer wants to, you know, dismantle the distribution plate at some point to clean it out in the future. It's going to be a bit easier for the customer to do that. There's also some different ports now. We have one down here, which can be used for going across to the bottom of the GPU, although I wouldn't recommend that because you're going to have air trapped in here if you do that. But it's actually a temperature sensor port. And there is another one down here which can be used as drain or temperature sensor. So the Powerboard is where we have really made a lot of changes, and we've introduced a lot of new features on Spectre 4. For those of you that are new to the Powerboard, as just a very quick introduction, I'm just going to say that it is essentially a distribution plate for your cables. So it puts the connector locations, instead of being way down here at the power supply, puts them closer to the components. And there are a lot of benefits, but I think the main benefit is that you no longer need cable management. So you don't need a large space out the back side, and you'll notice that from around the back, like, we don't have any space for cable management because with the Powerboard it is no longer needed. You don't need rear access, so we can put other things back there. You can build entirely from the front, and it means that the cable lengths can be standardized, so you don't need to have custom cables especially made exactly for your build. You don't have to use like cable extensions if that's something that you wanted to do. And the cables actually come included with the case, so you don't even have to think about buying cables anymore. It's all included and integrated. and you don't have to do cable management. So it literally takes seconds to plug in the cables. You just click the cables in and you're done. But aside from all of that, at the same time, the Powerboard integrates a lot of different features and functions. And this is currently patent pending, but we will soon have a full patent for this idea. And this is actually the first idea that we have patented. We thought it was very important for this one because we certainly assume that it's going to be copied. And yes, there have already been some copies, of course. So, some of the important things that we have integrated, the simple ones, the obvious ones, is PWM and RGB. SATA Direct Connect. Out the back here we have 2.5-inch SATA position and a 2.5-inch / 3.5-inch location. That's under these covers. On Spectre 4, we decided to put a 140mm fan mount directly behind the CPU socket, because we had this cutout here already, you know, obviously for rear access to the CPU socket for mounting, and we thought, why not just put a fan there? It's like the same size anyway. And you don't really think about this, but you actually do get a lot of hot air trapped behind motherboards, and it's got nowhere to go. There's no airflow. So that air might be ambient, like 50, 60 degrees, maybe more, when your system is under heavy load. So yeah, if you've got a fan blowing cold air on the back of your CPU socket, it is going to have an effect. So you can see we have a ton of PWM, and all of these connectors are positioned like in the optimal location for where you're going to be connecting fans from. So these ones here are for the front radiator, and at the top here for the top radiator. There's a lot more detail that I could go on into on the Powerboard, like you have all these input connections down here. We have standby lighting, so when the system is off you have a little logo back there that lights up from the back. This is things that I'll demonstrate when we do Spectre 4 builds soon. And of course there's a lot more secrets and little details that you will discover with Spectre, like when you start using it. Like, I'm not going to go over absolutely everything. There is really a lot more to it, and if I try to cover all of it, we're going to be here for a very, very long time. 8-pin PCIe, 12VH power, 24-pin, 6-pin supplementary. 2 EPS locations here, so 4 in total, but you're only going to use 2 at a time. They're just positioned differently for different motherboards. So here are the big changes with the Spectre 4 Powerboard and some things that have been introduced. We have PSU jump start, so you can start the PSU without the motherboard. We have temperature-based RPM control on the PWM, and we also have multi-zone PWM, and we have PWM for the pumps. So basically that's 4 zones. There's also a dedicated one for this fan, and there is inbuilt RPM fan curves, like built into the Powerboard, and you can also adjust those fan curves with these potentiometers. So by adjusting these, you can change the minimum RPM, you know, the start of the curve. And you might be thinking, why are we going back to kind of semi-manual? Like, it's not manual, there's still fan curves, but why are we going like back to this? And that is because a lot of people struggle with the fan control on motherboards. How do you know how to set up your fan curve? Really, you have no idea, you're actually guessing. And you don't find out until later when you're gaming, the system is under load, and suddenly it's just too loud. Well, then you need to reboot and go into the BIOS and start adjusting your fan curve. And how many times are you going to continue to reboot until you get your fan curve right? So we wanted to add something simple, like more analog, where, so let's just say the system comes under load for the first time, and all you have to do, it's too loud, just turn it down slightly, it turns the fan curve down, problem is solved. Because the whole point of a fan curve is to create a balance between the noise output and the performance. And with this, you can fine tune that by going in and out of the BIOS and rebooting over and over again. It's very hard to fine tune that. You may do that 15 times and it's still going to be too loud at a certain point in the fan curve. So we just wanted to create some simplicity. But then with these switches, you can still switch between the temperature sensor control or motherboard control. So you can still go back to motherboard control. And also the other thing is that motherboard fan curves, most of the time, they're going to be based on the CPU temperature, which is jumping up and down all over the place. So it might, you suddenly come under load, the CPU might just jump 20 degrees, and then suddenly the fan RPMs and pump RPMs are going to go up 30, 50% at a time. Very sudden jumps. What they should be based on is actually the coolant temperature, because that is the thing that matters. That is the thing that the fans are cooling, and so the RPM of the fans should be based on that. And the temperature of the coolant moves gradually. The system comes under load, and then over the next 5 minutes, the coolant temperature slowly rises by 3 to 5 degrees or whatever. So then the fans can respond accordingly to the thing that they're actually cooling. So just, better ways of setting things up. Extra power and reset buttons. We have this 12-pin connection, which is for an add-on that's coming up soon. I should mention the PSU Jumpstart is for running the pump or pumps without booting the system. This is very important when you are filling a water cooling system. Like, I've always used an external separate power supply to run my pumps, because you do not want to be switching the system on and off. You're going to damage the operating system, and it's just not good for the system to be switched on and off multiple times as it's trying to post. So you can just flick this switch as many times as you need to turn the PSU on and off to run your pump. Over here we have ARGB source, which switches from the Powerboard, which is actually this future add-on. So I am giving away one of the functions of this future add-on. So you can switch the ARGB control to that, or to the motherboard control. And here we have some dip switches for Powerboard, ARGB and UV. So yes, the Powerboard has integrated UV lights and ARGB lights all around the perimeter, which is what is mostly lighting up the case here. We also have some LED strips included. And you can run either ARGB or UV independently, or both at the same time. And you also have a switch there for the standby lighting, which is the little logo that I showed you around the back. And I think that is mostly it for the Powerboard. Spectre has a touch activated power button, which is a special touch circuit which we have designed. So you just touch here and the system switches on or off. And something else I should mention is that we actually have protective material underneath the feet now, so that the case is not going to scratch your desk. All of the other versions of Spectre, we had no protection under the feet, and so if you dragged the case across wood, it would potentially scratch it. So another quick look around the back. This is actually, personally, it has always been my favorite angle of Spectre, because you can see all of the integration of the water cooling system, the pump down here, the reservoir, all of the different parts of the loop, and you can also see the Powerboard integration in the back of the Powerboard here. This is Spectre 4 AVEM, the high-end limited edition version of Spectre 4. It is limited to 100 cases. The reason we do limited editions is quite simply because we love designing cases and we wanted to accelerate our development. We're constantly coming up with new ideas, building systems every day, and we didn't want to wait years between cases. So each limited edition is our latest ideas and technology. They're constantly improving. And it also allowed us to be creative with the cases, because the limited editions are themed. The theme of AVEM is space and time, time being the fourth dimension. So I'll just quickly go over the main differences between Spectre 4 Standard and AVEM. We have a limited edition anodizing color, which is like a shadow silver or a dark silver, graphite. The camera might not pick it up very well because it kind of changes depending on the light and angle. You'll notice that overall, aesthetically, it is far more detailed. It has a lot more machining detail. So, like there's a PSU top shroud, which on Spectre 4 standard is just a, the piece of metal, has an LED strip. And this is a lot of machining here, different layers. This is all CNC machined, so a lot of machining time goes into all of these parts. There are many hours of machining. I'm not sure exactly yet on a Spectre 4, but beyond probably 4 hours of machining, like it's a lot, and the assembly time is also very high as well. So a lot of work goes into creating each one of these cases. We have a screen on the PSU side shroud, which is a 1920 by 480 60 Hertz IPS screen. You can see the main distribution plate is it's just completely different. It's 4 layers instead of 2 layers. It has a lot more detail. It has higher volume. So extremely detailed and time-consuming machining here. So Avum has a lot of different logos as well. So we have the numbered limited edition badge. This one is actually 001, but a customer has requested case 1, so they won't actually get this case because this is a beat up prototype, but they will get the 001 badge. We have a different piece at the top here on Avum, so we have this extra Avum badge, and there is an extra layer here. This design is a bit different. Avum also comes with an extra front distribution plate, and this is mostly an aesthetic feature, although it does add volume to the loop. You can add a top distribution plate as well, and a side distribution plate, a dual loop side panel, so then you can have distros on 4 sides of your build. So that is similar to what you could do before with Proxima. But the Spectre 4 front distribution plate is quite a lot wider for the 420mm radiators, and it has a lot more ventilation. The Avum one is especially designed for Avum, so it has different covers and detailed etching. There is also one for the standard Spectre 4, and there is also a special dual loop side panel just for Avum. Avum also has a dust filter on the front distribution plate. I wanted to mention at this point that all of our pricing the method is the same. So whether it is something as small as an LED strip or it is an Avum, we do our pricing in the same way. And so we're not just saying because it's a limited edition it can just be whatever price. We're actually working back from the cost, the bare minimum that we can work with, and continue doing what we are doing. So sometimes, well, actually very rarely I'm asked, like, what is the reason for the price? And it's an answer that I like to give. The reason for the price is because it's what it costs to manufacture, and with our limited editions we are not holding back. Like, these cases are designed for people who are passionate about water cooling. We're going all out here. We're adding the features, like all of the cool features that we want to have in our builds. Having done thousands of water-cooled systems myself, these are features that I find really exciting and enjoyable to use, and it's just amazing building into something that I've spent so long perfecting and working on over the years. So, all of this really comes from our passion for water cooling, and the people that these cases are designed for are people who are really passionate about water cooling. Like, these are water cooling cases. All of the features are for water cooling. Looking around the back, you can see that it's very different. So we have a lot more machining detail and a lot more detail on the covers. So this cover is actually inlaid, so it is all level with the reservoir. And we've chamfered this here to create an extra glow around the edges. And then you can see there's a lot of reflections from all of the different layers inside. And this is extremely thick. Like, most of the weight of the case is in the distribution plate at the back. And then we have etching on the covers here. So it's actually quite subtle. It's very fine. We didn't want it to be too over the top on these textured matte pieces. So the two covers there at the bottom for the drives, and then the fan cover at the top. And all of this is level with the legs at the back, because the legs actually protrude quite a bit because they're very thick